Well, this presentation can go a number of different ways. Talk about a bunch of different things. I think the flyer said we were going to talk about the history of the day-use mooring program, and I can, because it's a really good story. And when we've done these presentations before, like for Manta Ray Day, we could talk for a whole hour about the history of the day-use mooring program. I'd like to introduce my partner and wife, Teri. I'd like to introduce you to each member of the audience. And if you're really curious about the history and want to talk about that, we can. Maybe you can ask me at a different time or at the end of the presentation. We can talk about it a little bit, but I thought I'd actually change the focus of the talk to how to inspect a mooring and how to report when the mooring is in need, because you guys all get out there and have actually seen moorings before, so I didn't bring a full-size model of it, but we do have this really cool small scale model, which is way easier to carry around than the full-size stuff. But in the way of history, I will say that in 1984, we got our first boat, the Blue Dolphin. You can go see it out there by the pool. It's still on display, it still runs. And when we started running the boat, I mean, we had already been here for a couple years, and we noticed how healthy the reefs were in Kona compared to Oahu, where we had come from, and the reefs just weren't as healthy, probably for a variety of reasons. But the coral has a lot to worry about besides boats dropping anchors on them, right? There's threats like storms and global warming and pollution and bad divers, but we didn't want to add to that boats coming along and dropping anchors. And back in 1984, there were only 3 companies operating boats in Kona for recreational diving. But even then, we knew that dropping anchors on the reef repeatedly were not going to do it any good. So Teri's dad was a marine scientist, and we asked him, what do we have to do to put in a permanent mooring? Can we put a concrete block in and put a buoy on it and use it? And he said, well, you'd have to have a permit for that. And he said, let me look around a little bit. And he found out that in Florida, a guy named John Hallis had pioneered a way of drilling into the bottom and installing permanent moorings that way. I thought that sounded crazy. Drilling a hole in the bottom of the ocean and putting a screw in it? No, we just want to bring in a big concrete block. But the bigger problem was actually that we did need a permit in order to do it. And so we learned about how they did it in Florida. We adapted that technique so that it would work in the hard lava that we have here, which is different from their bottom substrate in Florida. And it took us maybe a year or so to find out what type of equipment it would take and how to install these moorings. But what took a lot longer was getting that permit. And I remember I was so naive back then. I was really young, had a lot of hair on my head. And somebody said, well, it took John Hallis 6 weeks to get the permit. I went, 6 weeks? Oh man, I hope it doesn't take us that long. Here in Hawaii, it shouldn't take 6 weeks, right? 10 years later, we were still,
No.
yeah, it took 10 years to finally get it all approved. And I thought, well, that was hard because it hadn't been done before. You do something first time. The state wasn't sure if the state needed to give the permit. They told us that they thought the DOT, the feds needed to give the permit. The feds thought the state needed. So we weren't even sure who was going to give the permit. Nobody wanted to. And on top of that, and there wasn't even anybody opposed to the idea. Everybody usually when they hear about it, like, heck yeah, let's have moorings instead of anchors on the reef. I thought, well, the first time, 10 years, second time, it should only take a week or so. It really hasn't gotten any easier. If we wanted to go and add some more moorings, huh?
2 years.
It still might take 2 years, yeah. There's other hurdles to go through. There's more groups that need to be consulted about it. And sometimes people do have an opposition to the to an idea of having a new mooring put in. And usually I think it's an uneducated thing. They think, well, if they put in more moorings, it's going to mean more dive boats are going to come. And I don't believe that's true. I don't think people decide whether or not to start a dive business based on whether there's moorings or not. But anyhow, it's not easy to get the permit. It took a long time. It's a great story. In addition to Terry's dad and John Hallis, who worked for the National Marine Sanctuary in the Florida Keys, we also had help from Jerry Garcia. A lot of people have heard that story, that Jerry was one of our good customers, and he donated the money because we had no money. We were willing to volunteer our time and our boat to go out and install these moorings, but these things, even this thing, probably cost more money than what we had at the time.
Wow.
This little one, and the full-size ones are $500 to $1,000 just for the hardware. So Jerry, through his foundation, what was it called? The Rex Foundation. They donated, I think, $10,000 initially, which was enough to buy buoys, chains, ropes.
Kind of like $100,000 nowadays.
Yeah.
Wow.
It got us going. And now, 40 years later, we're still maintaining these moorings.
Wow.
And what the future holds remains to be seen. I think there's a chance the state will end up taking over the program. They will still need contractors to do the work. In the meantime, we've gotten our contractor's license. We have the equipment to do the work. We have a long history of doing it. So I hope that our entity continues to be able to do the work when it comes along, maybe not as volunteers anymore. But anyhow, what we really want is for all the users of these moorings to be able to understand how to report a bad mooring. Sometimes I'll get a call and they'll go, the mooring broke at this dive site. And they might tell me the name of a dive site that I've never even heard that name, right? So that's step one, is use the name that I call the dive site, right? We have the mooring booklet. I don't know, maybe Terry went to get it, but
Oh, okay.
there's official names that are in the booklet, and other people have made up their own names.
Yeah, she's got it.
Is that the mooring booklet? So yeah, don't use your own made-up name when you report a bad mooring to me. Step one, use the one that's in the book so I know what you're talking about. And then I get a call that'll say, yeah, the mooring broke. I'll go, well, what broke? The mooring. It's like, which part of it? Did just the buoy come off? And there's still a good rope and still good chains at the bottom? Are the eye bolts, did the eye bolts pull out of the bottom? That almost never happens. These are stainless steel eye bolts, 3/4 inch diameter, embedded at least a foot or 14 inches into the bottom. Terry's dad told us that these are designed to last 100 years.
Wow.
And even back then I thought, that's long enough, I won't be around.
You never know with science.
So most of these moorings pins still have 60 years left on them or more if used properly. It's important that they're installed properly and used properly, and there have been some failures of pins, but it's probably the least likely thing to fail. But if somebody came along and this eye was opened up, that's good information for me. Yeah, the pin itself broke or pulled out of the bottom somehow. Let me know that.
Or the whole rock got pulled out and floated away, and then
That's happened.
Okay.
And a major cause of pin failure is from improper use. To use a mooring properly, the boat pulls up, diver jumps in, puts the line through the buoy, and you gotta leave some rope from your boat so that it's called scope. So you're not shock loading the whole system. Terry's dad told me that putting a shock load on a pin like this would cause 100 times more wear and more load than a gentle, they just won't ever fail. And we used to have a liveaboard boat in town. I won't mention the name of it to protect their secrecy.
I know who you're talking about.
But they weren't sure that our rope was strong enough for their boat. So they'd have a diver go down and put a chain directly to the pin. Usually it was a brand new captain that hadn't really gotten trained properly on how to use it. And so instead of a nice stretchy nylon rope, they had a chain directly from a large 100-foot boat.
Straight out.
Just talk about a shock load. And
Yeah.
so most of the pins that have failed for some kind of reason like that, where it could break, it could pull out, because there was no stretch, no shock absorber in the system. So I need to know what failed. I always would recommend, anytime anybody uses one of these moorings, whether it's a recreational user or a commercial user, that immediately upon beginning the dive, that their crew or a customer inspect that mooring. Go down and have a look and make sure that the boat's still going to be there when they come back. I mean, here's an example of a bad shackle, right? I could break this shackle with my fingers, right? Imagine a boat pulling on it. And if one of these breaks and the boat suddenly is now live boating, it could really be catastrophic. Think about it. All of our moorings in Kona are very close to shore. And if the wind's blowing on shore, the back of your boat could be just a few feet from the rocks. And if suddenly the captain realizes the boat's sideways and the ball is now floating in front of the boat, right? Oh, we've got a bad situation. Got to fire up the engines. Do I have lines in the water? Do I have snorkelers around my props? Because it'd be better to have the boat go on the rocks than to chop somebody up. So it's just a horrible situation if you think about it. So it makes sense to send somebody in to inspect the mooring. And if they see a shackle like this, they might want to pop up and say, hey, Captain, stay ready. This mooring could break at any moment, right?
Don't go here.
Better yet, yeah, pick a different dive
Yeah.
site or attach a redundant line somehow to protect that boat. But, you know, these are all real things that we've found and changed, and we can talk about why they failed and stuff like that. But the handouts, you guys, maybe, here's a couple more handouts. If anybody else shows up, we'll probably need to make some more copies.
This one here was a cheap stainless steel.
Right.
Had a really good deal on stainless steel. And there's certain, I mean, just because it looks nice doesn't mean it is nice, so you definitely want to spend the extra money for the high-grade stainless steel.
And what part of the mooring is that on? That was a shock.
So if you look at the second
Yeah.
page of the
Oh, okay.
handout, there's a diagram of the mooring. And you can see at the bottom, there's the two eye bolts. And there's
Right.
different types of eye bolts too, and that's good information for me. If you're reporting on the condition of a mooring, tell me what kind of stuff was down there. So these are both perfectly acceptable eye bolts. This is a single piece of stainless that a welder bent over and welded to itself to form the eye. This is a 3/4 inch stainless threaded rod with an eye nut screwed onto it and welded here. And they would both do fine. But what's important too about the pin is that there's grip, because these are cemented into the hole. First we drilled a hole with a hydraulic hammer drill, 1.25 inches, so slightly larger than the diameter of this.
And they should be that much sticking up. They
Oh,
shouldn't
wow.
be like that. They should
Mm-hmm.
be like just the very top of it.
Yeah, if this much is sticking up above the rock, now that's a lever that can work back and forth when the boat pulls. One day it might pull this way, next day it might pull that way, and it'll weaken and it could break this. So yeah, you want to install them properly so that the eye is all the way down. But these are made with grippy either threads or blobs of weld material. You can see on here the welder added something so that the cement has something to hold on to when we put them in, and we use either epoxy or actually quickcrete anchoring cement is a less expensive alternative, and it sets up underwater. It works really well.
How long does it take to set?
About 24 hours before you'd actually want to put a load on it. So when we install one, we don't touch it for 24 hours, and then we can come back and put the line on it. Yeah, whether it's epoxy or quickcrete. So there's a lot to know about how to install them properly, and that could be a whole nother course. And I think it would be a fun course. I think we could teach a course in mooring installation and maintenance, and there would be people who would want to come and take that and enjoy doing the work with us to learn more about.
And your distinctive specialty at PADI, Jeff.
Yeah, it'd be fun. All right, so in the diagram you see the pins at the bottom. Then attached to the pins there are shackles, right? And shackles can be stainless. Usually you can tell because stainless is nice and shiny, right? And I'd be interested to know, was it a stainless shackle that failed, or was it galvanized? And I can talk a little bit about the differences between the advantages and disadvantages of each. But so you got the pin, then you got a shackle, then you got chain. Where's my little more? So this one doesn't have chain, but the chain would be attached to this shackle and go to each eye bolt, right? And the chain is something that needs to be looked at. And to inspect chain, you need a hammer. I would recommend gloves, and it's nice to have a slate. So if you're a person who's going to help us out and do inspections every time you use these moorings, not only are you helping your captain and the safety of your boat, but you're helping Malama Foundation to do the maintenance. You got to beat on the chain with a hammer because it's got scale, might have incrustation on it, right? So you beat on it, and you have to actually inspect every link of the chain, because there's an old saying, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And that saying is never more true than when you're talking about chain. Like the whole chain could look beautiful, but you just didn't look at that one link because it had a lot of stuff growing on it. So really, if you want to be safe, you gotta whack every link of the chain. And so there's like 2 feet of chain at to each pin. We like to put the pins in pairs, usually like this, as the diagram shows. It's Chris, right? Can you make a copy?
Yeah,
There's
we'll make a copy for it. Okay, good.
There's 2 pages by the copy machine that you can use if you want. So we like to put the pins in pairs. One reason is if one of the chains was to break, the other chain still holds the boat. And another reason is, now with 2 chains, we call that a bridle, right? The 2 chains together form a bridle, and it allows the pin to only be pulled in one direction. A single pin would be strong enough to hold even a large boat, even a large liveaboard boat. But one day, maybe the wind's blowing one way, and another day, maybe the wind's blowing the other way. It tends to put more work on the pin, but if there's 2 pins, like this pin can never really be pulled in that direction. The chain's going this way. So one day it might be pulling this pin, and the other day it might be pulling more on this pin, but it's the pins are better protected, I think, by putting them in pairs. And the pin costs about $100, let's say. The real cost of installing these moorings is getting this drill on a boat, going out, spending the day, drilling, using fuel. And so the extra $100 to put a pin in is well worth it in terms of the safety of having 2 pins. So there's then the 2 chains that you check. And over the years, we've tried different types of materials. And so it's not always a chain, it might be a cable, stainless steel cable. And some of those have lasted very well, and some of them, the cable itself starts to fray and starts to wear. So another thing to let me know, yeah, there was a cable down there and it broke, or it was chain and it broke.
Or there's several strands of it starting to break.
Yeah.
Because we have some moorings that we have not needed to do virtually anything with in 20 years. And then there are others that we've had to change out several times in 20 years because there's so much more boat traffic.
Okay.
You know, the Manta site, for example, you know, PADI, for example, Kahalu'u, those get constant use, and the reef is in great shape with the moorings, but the moorings need to be serviced a lot more often.
Thanks, Patty. I didn't want to make 100 of those copies just based on how many people I thought were going to come. You know. Same dream. So if you go back to page 1 here, and we're making our way down the line, I'd like to know what broke or what's about to break, what you think looks bad, because it'd be ideal to go ahead and change out that chain before it breaks if it starts to look thin. And also, and I put my email and my phone number on there. You can text me, you can call me. A lot of times people call Patty, you know, they call the shop, and Patty answers, or Joe or Margot, and they say, I'd like to report this bad morning. And they pass the message on to me, but go
Or
straight
they
to...
put it on Facebook. That's
Yeah.
not good either.
I don't always look at Facebook, so the best way would be to go ahead and send me an email or a text. But Patty's very reliable. If you want to tell her about the mooring, I always get the message. I'd also like to know, like, what's still good, because if they say, well, the buoy popped off, so I go out there the next day with a buoy, but then I'm about to put it in, and the whole rest of the mooring needs to be changed as well. So go ahead and complete the inspection, even if only one part broke, and let me know, and then I can go and bring the extra chains and shackles and whatever we need.
And what do you do if the buoy pops off? Let it float to shore, or what do you do?
Well, ideally, what they would do is recover it, and sometimes it's still tied to their bow, so that makes it really easy to recover it. Throw it in the water, you know. No, bring it in, and while it's still wet, if you get a little scrub, you know, hit it with a hose or pressure washer and knock off some of the algae that's on it, because once that stuff dries, it's just like cement. And I'm going to try to reuse any of this stuff that I can. What I always try to reuse is this thimble, right? This is a thimble, and some people aren't sure the difference between a shackle and a thimble, but now you guys all know. The thimble is the part that we splice the line around to protect the line from chafing. If we didn't have a thimble in here, then it would be rubbing against the shackle and the rope would not last very long. But with a thimble and a splice, as opposed to a knot, I mean, bowline is a great knot, right? But splice is better. Why is that? It doesn't weaken the rope as much, right? The splice only weakens the rope about 10% of its original strength. And a knot, even the wonderful bowline, weakens it more like 30%. So bowline's better than nothing, but splice, you know, and I had to learn how to splice rope, and that'll be part of our PADI mooring course. I do splicing. We used to have splicing parties, right? When we first had to make up all 46 of the first original moorings, we'd all sit around.
Splice and swear, I think they were.
Splice, swage, and swear, because we also had to swage the cables that we used back then. But since then, we've evolved, and our current setup, which is approved by the state of Hawaii, is to use galvanized steel chain at the bottom, pretty hefty, 5/8 inch steel chain, and then 3/4 inch galvanized steel shackles, and almost 1 inch rope, 7/8 inch rope, spliced around a stainless thimble. But yeah, these stainless thimbles are kind of pricey, so I'd like those back. You know, we don't want to just throw away, even if this rope's broken, somebody might throw it away, but no, I'd like to get that out and rinse it and maybe scrub it, because I'm going to try to clean it up and use it again and save the foundation a bunch of money. Up till now, the whole program has been supported by private donations, and so we try to conserve money. So I will pull the thimble out of the rope. If we throw away the rope, we do. Now, maybe you recover a buoy and it's got large coral growing on it. And we want to try to allow that coral to live, and all the little symbionts, all the little crabs and things that live in that coral. And that's why we've invited Chris Teague here to tell us what should we do with the coral that might be on a buoy or even on the rope itself, it might be so big it's starting to sink the buoy in some cases.
And ideally, we're trying to plan ahead so that nothing breaks and we can recover that coral before anything breaks.
I feel like we're at a crossroads, right, where for the first time, DAR, Division of Aquatic Resources, may be able to actually salvage that coral and let it live, right?
Yeah, that's the hope. We're building up our coral restoration program for West Hawaii. We have some folks on Oahu that already do this, but it's kind of the first go at it for our area. And so we should have an increasing number of staff that are around to be able to pull corals like that. So if one breaks off and you have this item with a bunch of corals on it, you can let us know and we can try to just arrange one of our staff to go meet up with you, try to get those corals off, and then get them over into our nursery at Nelha. Even more ideal than that, like Teri mentioned, is if we kind of get good report, have a good system of reporting for when there's moorings that have a lot of corals on them, or when they're starting to get on the edge, then we can work with that information and go out to those moorings, remove those corals beforehand, hopefully extend the life of the moorings themselves, and then we can either replant those corals directly onto the reef or take them back to the nursery.
We're also talking pie in the sky in the future, that since coral loves to grow so well on mooring lines, that would keep the buoy scrubbed so that they don't grow on the buoys, but on the lines themselves, let them grow, and then we can just do a transfer and actually almost use them as a coral growing aggregate. And and then in a perfect world, we do the mooring maintenance, the coral line would come off, go to where it goes with DAR, and the new line would go on, and we just actually use it to grow coral.
Yeah, and that's how they do it in a lot of other places around the world for these big coral nursery operations. These in-water nurseries, they're often just line nurseries. So we have a bunch of lines out there already that are really good at growing corals. So
They grow really well.
yeah, so it's capitalize on that.
I'm just so excited that we're finally, able to work with DAR and have something good to do with these corals. Going back to the kind of the components, I'm jumping all around, but the components of the mooring, right? We've talked about the pins, the shackles that connects the chains. At the top of those two chains, there might be one big shackle connecting both the chains to the rope, or sometimes there's two, one for each chain. So there might be 4 shackles at the bottom with the 2 chains, as in the diagram on page 2. I think that shows, 4 shackles at the bottom. And then the rope has a thimble. Everybody knows the difference between a thimble and a shackle now, right?
Yes.
And then the rope itself, how does it look? Sometimes with these ropes have a broken strand. Well, this is 3-strand nylon, so it starts with 3. If one's broken, it's down to 2/3 already. We want to replace that rope if it's got a broken strand. The rope has surprised me how long lasting it is. We have ropes that are down there from the 1980s
Wow.
that if nothing chafes against it and no vandalism occurs to it, and nothing cuts it, like a big coral head growing on the bottom of the buoy could chafe against the rope, but the rope itself, it doesn't just seem to die of old age. It lasts and lasts. So corrosion, abrasion is sort of the enemy. So sometimes there'll be chafing gear. This is a piece of fire hose that protects the rope. And my little model here has a little fire hose chafing gear on it. I'd like to know if that's in there or not. Good thing to check. They don't all have it. And in the early days, all the buoys were like this. The rope went right through the hole in the buoy, spliced around another thimble at the top, and that's what held the buoy from popping off. And the diver dives down, puts the rope through that thimble. Okay. We thought maybe we had a better system a couple decades ago, and we started running a chain through the buoy instead of rope, because sometimes this rope does get chafed down here. So most of the buoys that you'll see now have a chain going through. The problem with that is you can't inspect that chain. It's inside the buoy, right? The boat's tied up here, so if that chain fails in there, the boat's gone. Nobody really had any warning about it. And plus I have all these old buoys that have a small hole through them, too small for chain, and I want to reuse those buoys, so I may go back to using rope through the buoy. And as long as it's got fire hose on it, it might last like some of those original ones have for a long, long time. And it enables us to reuse about 30 buoys that we have salvaged over the years that are the holes too small for chains. Anyway, you might encounter a variety of different styles and materials. Tell me as much as you can about what you found and what failed. If it's shiny like this, it's probably stainless. But like Teri said, not all stainless is equal. There's different grades, and man, there's a whole bunch of different ones, but the most common ones are 304 stainless, which works pretty well above water, but it's more corrosion, susceptible to corrosion than the 316 stainless. So this shackle here is 316, it's stamped right on it, 316. So you think that's probably pretty good. That's the right kind of stainless. But it turns out there's also differences, and I'm not a metallurgist, I wish I was, but it's complicated stuff. Chemistry, stuff like that. There's forged versus cast stainless. And I learned that the hard way. Where's that?
Puts
That
passing
bad
around.
one. Okay, that's cast. And if you look at where it broke, it's, you know, it's all bubbly inside, right? It wasn't made like out of a single piece. It was like cast. It was like
Do you know
liquid.
how long that
Anyhow,
lasted?
It was like recycled metals going together, and it wasn't.
plus it was really small to begin
Didn't last
with.
very long.
But my thought at that time was, if it never gets any thinner than this, that's strong enough. It doesn't have to be as fat as a galvanized shackle because it's not going to degrade. Well, I was wrong, for one thing, and but it was cheaper. So if I was going to use stainless now, I'd want big old fat stainless like that,
Yeah.
forged, 316 stainless, or galvanized. And I would think, well, why would we even use galvanized? It rusts, it corrodes away. And it does, but with galvanized, what you see is what you get, right? I've never seen a beautiful looking galvanized shackle just fail suddenly. They fail when they look like
It's being passed around.
that one, like Nabil's.
Okay.
You know that's gonna fail, right? It looks like it's gonna fail. But if it's fat and it's galvanized, it's not gonna fail suddenly. That shiny one right there, that failed very surprising. You know, we weren't expecting it because it looked real shiny. You could inspect this and wow, look at that, it's beautiful. But what was going on inside of it? And stainless will hide that. You can't see what's going on inside the stainless. So that's why we generally use galvanized, and we just have to change them out every couple of years. When they start to get thin, you change it out. And the other advantage, of course, is it costs about 1/7 as much as a stainless 316 shackle. Is this, yeah?
We're good.
So through a grant that Malama Kai Foundation got, and the Coral Reef Alliance provided, Malama Kai Foundation, Jeff, and our executive director at the time, Terry O'Halloran, wrote for the state of Hawaii the mooring book installation, a maintenance book. So through Malama Kai Foundation, we provided the state with trainers to train people on how to inspect moorings, and Jeff and I are both trainers, and we've trained people on outer islands and a few people on this island. We need to train more people because a lot of people aren't here anymore. But anyway, we also put together a day's mooring book, and each island has one. Ours is very old. This has longitudes and latitudes and not GPSs in it. But when you make a donation and pick up one of these books, we also put an addendum that has all of the names and the numbers of all of our dive sites on the island of Hawaii. And if they're not in the book or they're not on that addendum, they are not Malama Kai Foundation State of Hawaii day use moorings. And when we did install the moorings in the state of Hawaii that are the actual state day use moorings, they're all legal, they're all permitted. Only 46 of them on this island are actually written into rule. The other ones should follow the same rules, but they're not actually written into rule yet. And at some point in time, if the public and DOBOR and DAR can get together and figure out a way to, to write them into rules so that it becomes a better system, that's something that we're all working on. And DAR is going to be probably taking the lead with day use moorings in the future.
Yeah, we're doing that pilot thing on Maui, right?
Yeah.
I'm not super keyed in on that. I know they were talking about piloting some like, combined Malama Kai Foundation.
Yeah, and it's actually a program that we've been doing, but now this is just an official one for a certain amount of moorings. So yeah, that kind of gets a little bit complicated, but the dollar per head that all of us are paying as commercial operators, anytime we take somebody out, on our boats, we're paying $1 per head. And so a percentage of that, I think 20%, is going to be going to, DAR is going to allocate towards day use moorings. And we're also looking during this pilot program statewide of identifying non-permitted moorings that are being used a lot and working on a plan towards making them legal statewide, so, and implementing the next round of buoys, which would be pretty cool. So anyway, it's MalamaKaiFoundation.org.
I put it on there.
Yeah, if you donate to that, the money goes to day use moorings. You can say that you want it to go to moorings in Kona or whichever island you might be on. We also, through the foundation, we also do children's programs, scholarship programs, reef talks. The reef talks that people have been going to here in Kona are all funded through Malama Kai Foundation, so through donations.
I'm always surprised by the number of commercial operators who don't donate to the Malama Kai for the day use moorings. They use these moorings every day. They charge people money to use them, and very few of the operators make donations. So encourage not only your friends, citizen divers, but if you know operators that use these moorings that haven't been donating, they really should. Hopefully in the future, it won't rely on donations as much. It'll be funded through money collected through DAR, and then I think you'll probably see fewer dangerous moorings out there because people are going to get paid to do the maintenance, to do the inspections. We do it as we can right now, but we don't have the resources to be out there every day just checking moorings. So we rely on you guys to inspect them. I just want to real quick finish up the components, what to inspect. So there might be a chain going through the buoy, and if you can't inspect that chain and you suspect it might be bad, it's okay to tie your line through below the buoy. If there's a thimble like this or a big shackle below the buoy, you can tie the boat off to that. Now you don't care if this breaks, the boat's still going to be tied to the mooring. And then at the top of the buoy, there's a collar usually to protect the buoy so that the eye of the shackle at the top doesn't just get pulled down into the buoy. A buoy could just pop right off the top of it. So we have a plastic collar you might look at and see, well, maybe this thing's starting to disappear down into the buoy. Report that to me. And the last thing is when you put a shackle together, we put it on real tight, and then you wire it with stainless steel seizing wire. And you have to wire the shackle pin so that it can't unscrew itself. And you would think, why would it want to unscrew itself? Nobody knows, but they do. They try to unscrew themselves. And imagine, and here's one too, this is stripped, right? There's threads on there. They're like, oh, but if this is wired, it'll still hold the boat. So the wire is really important. So if you see a mooring and the shackles don't have seizing wire on them, report that. You could save a boat. seizing wire, really important.
How's it wired to?
So you go through, there's a little hole in the end of the shackle pin, and you take the seizing wire and you double it, and you put it around the side of the shackle and through the hole, and then you just twist it. And that way it can't turn. And there's not a huge force trying to whatever that force is, that evil twisting force, it's not very strong. But it will do it if you don't wire the thing.
Little shrimp.
It's crazy. I had to learn that the hard way.
I don't know if I missed it, Jeff, but what is the tonnage of vessel that can hold when it's tied up? Do you guys know? A
Well,
certain
we tested
capacity?
them when we first installed them. And we worked with Department of Transportation at the time and Department of Land and Natural Resources. DOBOR and DAR weren't invented yet. And anyway, we have a load locker, and we tested them to 4,000 PSI, pulling straight up on them. So.
Yeah. And nobody's pulling straight up because of the bridle, you're pulling
Yeah.
against it. So
That
it should
was-
hold 100-foot boat, and they do. When that boat on Maui went aground, it was in the news every day.
Right.
The mooring didn't fail. His rope failed. And plus he was living on the thing. He wasn't a day use, you know. These, you're only supposed to use them for 2.5 hours, not
If
sleep on
somebody
it.
else is waiting. And
Jeff, what's the recommended scope on off the pins or the floats?
A bunch, you know. If you're at the manta ray site, you don't want to put so much on that you're going to bang into another boat, but more is better.
Right,
I like a 3-to-1.
3-to-1?
And the buoys are about 10 feet deep, and so you should at least have 30 feet of line, you know, each way, and then we're putting our line through it and back to the boat, so that's actually 60 feet of
Right,
line
right.
to get 3-to-1. So anyhow, your mooring line on the bow of your boat should be probably at least 150 feet long, so that your crew can safely jump in, go through it, bring
Right.
it back. But you see all the time, you see these boats tied
Yeah.
tight to it, and that is just putting
Not.
a huge amount of wear on that mooring.
And we did have one fail that was not by the liveaboard boat, but it was by another large boat in town. And they were tied straight up and down above it on a very windy day. And these are these are fair weather moorings. They're not meant
Yeah.
to go tie off to if there's a hurricane, you know, or something. It's not like you're mooring out in Kahalu'u Bay. But they were straight up and down, and it was really windy, and there were swells, wind swells, and it yanked a giant-sized boulder that never should have come out of the bottom
Wow.
up, and then the captain noticed that he was now floating in a couple of 100 feet of water because it was that PADI area, and he was blowing towards Kailua Pier. And he's like, what the heck? It's a miracle it didn't yank the cleat right off of his boat. But they, cut the line, and so the whole thing fell down. So all the
This
buoy and everything is
8,000-pound
now.
boulder, and this
Yeah, it's
didn't
probably
come
still
out.
down there.
Right?
Great way to end it.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
A
folks?
quick question, the moorings way south where the liveaboard used to moor, is there anyone checking those? Or if we notice something, who do we tell?
Those are not day use moorings.
Okay.
So if you go south of Ridges, which
Uh-huh.
is right just north of Kahalu'u Bay, nothing south of that is currently a permitted mooring,
Got it.
but they are moorings, and so it's kind of been decided by the state that that better to have something, they're not really being super hard on unpermitted moorings at this time because
Right.
it's better than damaging the bottom.
Uh-huh.
But that's why those will be on the list for future. But if you are out there, I would check them. I don't know who maintains those.
Okay,
It's not part of Malama Foundation or
Got it.
DAR or anything
okay.
currently, so.
Yeah.